Have you ever walked into a building and felt something? Have you ever walked in after somebody had had a fight into a room and felt the energy? Can a building store energy? That's what we're talking about today. We're speaking of spirits. Join us as we discuss energies in buildings. Can a building keep an energy field? All right, welcome. This is Speaking of Spirits, and we're glad you joined us for this podcast. Right now, we're talking about buildings. Can they hold energy? What kind of energy can they hold? How long can they hold the energy?
All good questions.
Absolutely.
So energy is kind of a weird topic altogether. And I'm sure Colleen will talk about water a lot. But when you're around water, you can kind of feel it. When you're around people, you can kind of feel it too. When I was young, I worked in a funeral home. And you really don't understand how much you can feel energy until you have your first experience with a dead person. Because it feels awkward. Because there's someone there, but you can't feel them. Mm-hmm. And going into homes and houses, I feel that that's a lot of the same way too. The house that I live in is home for me. I was raised in the house. My grandpa built it. I've had a lot of loved ones pass away in it. And when I think of home and the feeling of home, I think of this building. Is that an energy? Is that a feeling? I don't know. I can't tell you for sure. But I do know that I feel good when I'm in it. And I know that it's a comfortable place for me. Mm-hmm. And I feel that in itself is an energy. But a lot of other places can have different energies, for sure.
Yeah, so this topic, I was thinking about this topic a few weeks ago when I viewed a documentary on the Omni Hotel in Los Angeles. And there's so much negative events or people that have been drawn to that hotel. Why that hotel? I mean, so Richard Ramirez, I believe, in the Night Stalker, he lived in that hotel. There was another serial killer, lived in that hotel. The young lady was murdered in that hotel. People have committed suicide on the steps of the hotel. I mean, it's just, what is it about that particular place that draws either negative people or horrific events to happen? I know that, I've walked into a room where people have fought, and without even seeing body language or facial expressions, you feel the tension. Mm-hmm. So, in thinking about a traumatic event, the murder of somebody in a space, does that energy of violence remain? I mean, some people are oblivious to everything. They never feel anything. But I feel everything when I walk into a building. How does that happen?
Well, I don't think you can destroy energy.
Right.
We like to think we can create it, but we definitely can't destroy it. And I think that it can stay, personally. I watched that documentary, too, based on your suggestion. And it is quite the place, that hotel. And the positioning of it,
right,
where it is,
right,
it's still there,
right,
which is crazy in its own right. And the energy right outside of it, too. The
Skid Row.
Skid Row.
Right there.
Exactly.
And it's enormous. Skid Row in LA is enormous. It's blocks and blocks and blocks of drug use.
And they emphasize that the police officers just put up a barricade and just say, just do it over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Pocatello had the same thing, right? I mean, honestly, they called it Gates Fence City was the area around Portland Valley Brewery, and that whole section down there on First Street. They fenced it off to keep the good people out
Yeah.
of the red light district.
Yeah.
I mean, that Pocatello doesn't have that history.
Yeah, I was actually looking at a building down there. I was thinking of buying it, and I toured it all. And it was a cool building. Like, it had really kind of a cool vibe until you got to the basement. And there was a little office in the corner, and there was a safe in the office. And we were tootling around looking down. The lights weren't working, so I was using my flashlight phone. It seems like it has taken over every part of my life, this phone. And when we were down there, I could have sworn I saw a head pop out of the safe and come back out. So I beelined it to the safe, and I was looking around. And when I entered the safe, it was a different feeling than the whole rest of the building. It was something happened right there. Don't know what it was, but you could feel it. And
Interesting. Yeah.
so when you elevate an experience and pile it on top, what happens?
Right. Well, the top floors of the Omni Hotel, they're by code, they have to rent to rent-controlled folks.
Right.
So you have a level of maybe helplessness and desperation in a lot of these lives up there. And maybe that just cascades down. They try to call it the Elegant Omni Hotel now because they have some floors that are really elegant, beautiful. But the documentary pointed out that you have all of these swanky people renting these really high rent rooms, riding the elevator with the rent controlled people, which fine, but it's just this weird dichotomy of energy in a place like that. I mean, you have, and what about that place drew 2 serial killers to live there? I mean, prolific serial killers.
2 that we know of.
2 that we know of. Could have been a lot more. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're located right next to Skid Row, right? So if you want to be a bad guy and go do horrible things to people, what better place to live so you could go into Skid Row and really hurt people who are completely helpless, really, at that point in their life.
Yeah.
It's a horrible scenario. It's kind of a monster hotel. You look at it and it just gives me the willies. I don't know, maybe it's because of the documentary, but you look at the hotel and it feels violent to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's buildings here in Pocatello that have had violent pasts and violent histories. And even without knowing the history, when I first moved here, going into some of these buildings, I felt immediately that something happened here.
Yeah.
Either bad or good, something happened here. It's usually not good. I mean, when you feel that feeling, it's not a good feeling. Yeah. It's usually, wow, something traumatic happened. It's that intensity. I can still feel it.
Yeah. And it seems like on some of the investigations that we go on, it's just somebody wants their story told.
Yeah.
For lack of a better paragraph. And maybe that energy is the way that they're trying to tell the story. That's kind of what I've put together in my brief 37 years here on Earth. That feeling, it might have been the feeling that they were feeling.
Yeah, maybe. What do you think, Mark?
Oh, I really like the way you're phrasing that about the Omni Hotel, how it attracts serial killers and others. Well, that's an interesting way. I don't know if you intentionally phrased it that way or if it just came out, but that's a very, very interesting phrase and way of looking at it. And I'm not sure you're wrong there. In fact, I think there's something to that. I think it actually attracts a certain level of energy.
Right. It's
like,
almost
like a magnetic attraction.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. Is like you're searching for a place to hang your hat, your, Joe Bad Guy, and you're probably drawn to certain places, and maybe the Omni is that magnet pulling these people in. You know.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely one of it. I am just now starting to realize, research the importance of emotion, especially in dealing with the paranormal. I think a lot of residual haunts, residual activity are places of very, very high emotion. And the emotional level got to a certain point to where it just imprinted in that location in that time.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of these other things too are the same way. Something highly emotional happened.
Yeah.
And I'm really starting to realize the connection between emotion and paranormal.
Yeah.
So I think there is something there. I don't know enough about it to really, say a lot about it, other than there is a definite connection going on there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think something, if you have, and this is what happens a lot of times is, well, somebody died here. Well, that's usually a very highly emotional situation. Especially for the person dying, that releases a lot of emotional energy.
Yeah.
And then depending on the situation around it, was it a murder? Was it self-defense? Was it suicide? It can be surrounded with a bunch of other emotions. I mean, the act of dying itself releases a ton of emotion and can imprint on a location. And then whatever emotion surrounds it can just amplify that, whether it was anger, depression, anything like that. So
Fear.
Fear
Fear's a big one.
fear is a very big one. So I think there's definitely something with if a highly emotional event happened, that energy gets imprinted there. But I would also like to say there's also positive emotions too.
Right.
There's places where you go to that you just feel good.
Right.
And so it's also possible to have very positive emotions.
Yeah.
Energy, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
In a location too.
That's what I was trying to bring up with my house.
Yeah.
It's-
And I'm
Right.
glad
It's
you brought
always-
that up.
It's not always
too, 'cause
negative.
it's-
Yeah, for me, those feel-good places for me are always outdoors. I'll get somewhere and it's like, wow, you just feel amazing. You feel amazing. And it doesn't even have to be like the scenery of the Tetons. You could just be somewhere where you just have that overwhelming feeling of comfort come around you. And so this is interesting. There's a antique store on Main Street. And I have a neighbor, a good friend of mine, who doesn't claim to be sensitive at all. She's not involved at all in the paranormal. She doesn't want anything to do with it. And I feel everything, right? So we're going to go upstairs in this store, and we're taking the back stairs. And I start feeling immediately like I'm being strangled. And being empathic, I have to breathe myself through these things because it's not me and it's not my pain. I just have to let it go. And she's like, you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Well, we get upstairs and she's thinking I'm crazy. And she starts going through some of the little spots they have. And all of a sudden, she's gasping for breath. I go, what's the matter? She goes, I need to get out of here. And I'm like, whoa. Well, just talk to me, tell me what you're feeling. And she starts telling me, and I said, well, this isn't you. You're connecting with some energy here. This is not you. And she took her about 20 minutes to breathe her way through that, but then she still wanted to leave. She's like, we need to leave.
Yeah.
We need to go. So that very first, I got to watch somebody with their very first paranormal experience, right? And watching her body respond to it and everything else, it was kind of interesting. Whether it was a negative energy or positive energy, she had just never felt that before. And she didn't know how to handle it. So it brought up an anxiety attack. So
That's pretty dang close to what it is.
Yeah.
Especially after the first time.
Right.
I remember after my first experience, it took 3 or 4 days. And I finally rationalized to myself that I would be okay. And I needed to breathe. And afterwards, it actually got me really, really curious. So I would be intrigued to see her feelings in a couple months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, we've talked a little bit about it because this happened several months ago, and she doesn't even want to talk about it now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
She's in denial.
Do you hear that? Anonymous you? You listen to our podcast? So yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think that feeling also can warn you of places that you probably shouldn't be. You know, all of us can be spiritually attacked, regardless if you're Christian, Catholic, right? Whatever paradigm you live by, we all, I think, can be attacked by something. And I think when you enter a space and you have that twinge in your gut, like, this is probably not a place that I should be, you should probably listen to it.
For sure.
Because maybe you're not equipped to handle what could come next if you haven't worked in this field. And it can really mess with you for a long time. We had that reporter that worked with us at the Portland Valley Brewery on that investigation. And that investigation was so bananas upstairs. Things started spiraling out of control so fast that he fled, and I didn't hear from him for 2 years. I wish he would have called. I wish he would have talked to me immediately, because we could have helped him through that. That was his first paranormal experience, and what a doozy it was. And it can, if you're not prepared to face what's going to happen, what could happen in some of these situations, then it can really screw you up. He didn't write for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I felt so bad because we could have helped him through that.
Yeah, he could have. He was a reporter for our local newspaper, and he was with us on that investigation. And it was a busy one. We had a lot of stuff going on. And him specifically really had some very direct experiences.
Yes.
And I don't think he was prepared for that. He was prepared to come in and kind of, talk about it. I don't think he was prepared to become part of, the experiences there. So,
well, especially if he wasn't expecting to find anything.
Yeah.
I think most people aren't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, we did Tough Guy Lanes, right? And we had a reporter with us on that one. And the minute we started unpacking the equipment, one of the pieces of equipment flew off the shelf and into the trash can. And she was just like, "What is happening here?" I'm like, "Well,
you're the reporter.
You're
you
the
tell
reporter.
me.
Isn't this something that Now she's all excited and wants to go over and over and over. But because she's like, "Does this happen all the time?" No, usually not. Tough Guy is just kind of a,
It was a unique one.
It's a unique one, but
it was really interesting.
It was an interesting one.
If you haven't watched the Tough Guys YouTube clip from us,
Yeah.
do yourself a favor and watch it.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I do think, I think it's kind of a yin-yang effect. I think buildings can draw people. People are drawn to different locations for different reasons. I know there's places that I just don't like going into. A place of business. It has nothing to do with the business owner, the business itself, or the employees. It's building. I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
I really think that if you are open to your emotions and your senses, you'll pick up on that. We're just, as a people, are very out of tune. I mean, the cavemen had to live by that. They had to live by their emotions, because they'd be eaten. You know what I mean? So it's like we've lost all of that being modern society.
And that denial word's going to come up again. It's a lot easier to process things in your day if you have a steady amount of denial.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've noticed a lot of times people will deny it, and they've either never had an experience, and that's fine. That happens. Some people actually go through life and never have an experience. Or they've had something that rattled them so bad at some point in their life that it's easier to deny everything than try to figure out what they went through.
Yeah.
You know, and then they've also probably never met anybody like us who can actually help them with it.
Yeah.
You know, help them process their experience.
Yep.
And work through it.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to, after a pretty traumatic event in my life, I went to a counselor to help me work through the PTSD portion of it, right? And thankfully, she was really into the paranormal. And she used that ability in her counseling sessions. So it was really quite interesting to be able to work with somebody who's professional to talk about a PTSD event, but who was also didn't poo-poo the fact that I work in this field, that I do these things, and I think have a heightened sense of perception than maybe some other people.
That's pretty rare,
You know,
to find some therapist or anybody in that
Right.
field who is open to. I often wonder throughout history how many people who have had abilities, not because they've had the abilities, but because they were treated by the way they had abilities, how many of it ruined their lives.
oh yeah, and that's definitely going to be one of our topics at some point. Is the lack of God, I don't even know how to say it. The lack of respect the medical world gives to people who have the ability to do things or see things or hear things.
Yeah.
You know, the older I get, the stronger the medium portion comes to me. You know, and I think if you work in this field, you develop things senses that you never relied on before.
It's easy to pick up on those anxieties too. I've noticed that a lot in my life. I've been trying to work through my own set of PTSD stuff, and I haven't found a good counselor. But the world we live in today, it is really hard for me to have a mask on. Really, really hard. And I've been trying to be okay, but it's amazing how, like, your emotions just turn on, just like that. And the slightest thing wearing a mask in this particular climate, but it's a lot like when you enter a place with an energy. All of a sudden it's there and it's on. And I think that when it all boils over, that it may be part of a defense mechanism. It may be a warning. It may be those things that we were talking about. But I think it's hard to deny that it isn't there.
Yeah. Do you find yourselves, and I do this a lot, just turning it off because otherwise you're just so bombarded by everything? So there's a restaurant that I happen to really enjoy, but I hate the building. You know what I mean? So I go in there because the minute I walk through the door, it's like I'm just hearing 1,000 voices trying to talk to me, the dead. They're just there. They inhabit the space so much. But I love the restaurant, so I will go in there and I will just try to block it completely so that I can enjoy my meal.
Is there a lot of garlic there?
Yeah, but have you found yourself in that situation?
I'm really bad at it.
Yeah. Blocking? You're really bad at
Yeah,
blocking.
you have to set up boundaries.
Yeah.
You have to, because otherwise you're just being bombed. Or even just driving around town.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we drive around town here, there could be something in a building and it will scream at you.
Yeah.
So you've got to set up some type of boundary. But then again, that's, one of the things that we need to teach people. If you have abilities, you can set the boundaries.
Right.
You can block it. That doesn't mean you totally ignore it, but you can also turn it down, block it, control it.
It's hard to have those boundaries if all of a sudden it's there.
That is true too. If you don't know what's coming up, it's hard to.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about that house where the people, when they would fight, things would catch on fire.
Mm-hmm.
Just when we said this, driving it into the driveway, it was and it wasn't even so much negativity, but it was almost like this. For me, I don't feel fear when I'm on an investigation at all. I fear the living more than the dead. I never really am afraid.
We have
But
one
it was-
investigation like that, yeah. The
But it
living
was-
scared me more than
Yeah, yeah. But the fear, it was like fear. I almost felt fearful, like to even get out of the car. There was just so much. And it's not, negative isn't the word, but there was so much energy, and it wasn't good energy. There was just so much energy on that land and in that house that you're kind of overwhelmed when you get out of the vehicle.
Yeah.
That's why I sent Mark outside to figure out what the noises were. So I'm like, let's go.
As a demonologist, I spent a lot of time in the dungeon. And
I'm really not afraid of things, but that
send the
house was-
demonologist downstairs. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So there's definitely buildings that will attract you once you get into this field because you feel the energy and you're like, I don't want in there so bad.
Mm-hmm.
I want to experience. We all say this laughingly. We want to see the worst. We want to see that couch lift up and fly across the living room. You know what I mean? I don't know what will happen if we ever did see it, but we want to experience paranormal at its height. And we have these little encounters at every investigation that keeps us yearning for the next one and the next one and the next one. But I think that for us, the big thing is to be able to help people.
Yeah. And those energies are crazy. When I was in Texas, I was invited into a home, and it was a crazy negative energy. It was silly.
Like
And-
negative what? Like they fought or?
So it's the only time I've ever felt this in my life,
Okay.
but it felt when you walked into the door. Have you ever done a squat with a whole lot of heavy weight? And when you first take it off the bar, it compresses your spine.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like that.
Wow.
I don't know how to explain it other than that. And when we walked in, it was just heavy. Really, really,
Yeah.
really, really heavy. And while we were talking, it got heavier and heavier and heavier. And finally, when it was about time to go, I said, well, thanks for inviting us in. It's been a great time. and
We're out. See you.
We're out.
And he said, just wait for just a second. And we were watching, and all of a sudden he had a notebook, a notepad, and it was right next to the phone.
Yeah.
And the pencil just started to move back and forth, and then it went to a full pendulum. It was crazy.
Wow.
Uh-huh. And the energy was crazy.
Yeah.
And so I said, again, it's been a pleasure. Bye.
But I'm out.
Yeah. And so when we walked into the porch, you know, when you get that really heavy squat bar
Right.
off your back,
Yeah.
and how good it feels,
Yeah.
and you feel like you weigh 0 pounds,
Yeah.
it was that. And I thought, holy cow, that was the weirdest experience I've ever had. And apparently they were renting the house, and the next month, it was gone. That they were gone.
But
The
people were gone?
the people were gone.
They left.
And someone was moving in, and
Oh boy.
I thought, I gotta know. And so we offered to help move them in. Just
Just because you wanted to know.
I gotta know.
Do you feel it?
And I got in there, and it was the same feeling.
Wow.
It was weird. I really wanted to blame the family, but
But it was something
The
with the
location,
house. Yeah, the
Mm-hmm.
location.
There was something in that house that happens.
and that was probably the biggest time that I ever felt something like heavy like that. But it did make me realize that there's different things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some good things and some bad things and some in between things.
Mm-hmm.
But if something bad happens at a place, I really think that it can stay. I really, really do.
Again, and for reasons I haven't figured out yet, there's a lot of entities that will stay in a specific location,
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't move on
and not even within a building, they will stay
in
you
a
know,
particular
in
room.
one room,
Right.
in one section of the building.
The safe in the basement.
It's safe in the basement, or in the basement, or
Right, closets.
in the closets.
Big,
Yeah,
big thing with closets.
and they will
Yeah.
stay in one spot of the house. They won't take over the entire house, but they will stay in one spot within the house. And I've never, I can't really come up with an answer for that.
Yeah.
Why that happens? Just
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. I think that a lot of people discount what they're feeling when they walk into a space because they don't understand it, and I would tell our listeners to start paying attention to those senses because they mean something. I mean, a lot of people, I don't have any gifts. I don't have it. I don't. But then they'll tell you back, I went into the store the other day and it was the creepiest place.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So no, you are feeling something. You are tapping into a paranormal sense. So pay attention to those things.
Well, and I think it's today's society too. You almost have to justify your emotions, and that's bogus.
well, on the other side too. If you go somewhere where you just really feel like you belong, it feels very, very comfortable to you.
Yeah.
Notice that. Why is that?
Right. I've lived all over the country, all over. And the only place I've ever felt like that was the moment I entered the French Quarter.
Yeah.
Yep. It had the very first time I was ever there. Never been there before. I could go down every street and tell you what was there or what used to be there.
Really?
It was, I never wanted to leave. It felt like home.
Wow.
I loved it. Every moment of it. Every time I've gone. It's like coming home. And it's the neatest feeling because I've never felt it anywhere before.
There's two places that I feel like that. One of them is around Seattle, Washington, and the other one is around Nashville, Tennessee.
Huh.
Both of them, I just feel like I'm home. I'm here. I belong here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can.
I think the only time I've kind of felt like that is around about St. George, and it wasn't a full "this is home," but it was so beautiful that and I felt like I knew where the trails went. So
Yeah.
it's
Down
an
there in the
interesting-
Red Rocks.
Exactly. Yeah. The what do they call it? The fire.
Valley of Fire.
Yeah, it's Valley of Fire. Is that what it is? It'll come to me.
Yeah, because in the summertime, it is the Valley of Fire. It is hot down there.
Stupid hot.
Beautiful down there, but boy, is it hot.
Yeah.
So one of the things I was trying to research, and it's kind of interesting that there isn't anything really out there for as much as I feel it is discussed with whether or not there's ley lines. So the concept of ley lines is that there's these lines that circle the globe and they intersect here and there, right? And that on these lines, particularly in England, they have a lot of castles and churches and everything in these lines, and they intersect. And you can actually stand on certain points and you can look in the distance and see like castle and castle and castle and castle and castle. It's really quite fascinating. So, but no one has really geographically plotted these lines anywhere that I can find. But could there be, California faulted like crazy, right? San Andreas, all of these faults. Could some of these energy fields be geologically driven? Like, could the Omni Hotel be over a ley line? Could it be over the top of a fault, an intersecting fault, or something like that? Could some of these places like Teos, New Mexico, and places of real spiritual places, people that they go there, they like in New Mexico, they feel like a religious experience is happening to them when they're in certain places. Right? So all over the world we have these places. Are they on ley lines?
Aren't all the pyramids on ley lines too? The
That's the
Aztec and
concept,
Egyptian?
right? Is that they're on ley lines, and that they're also celestial bodies. They line up to certain constellations. And something that fascinated me when I lived in Texas, there's this place called Painted Rock, Texas. It's in West Texas. It's a privately owned ranch, but there's pictographs and petroglyphs. So pictographs are painted on and petroglyphs carved in from the Indians that used to live there. But they all line up to certain constellations on certain dates. So if you look through the rocks you can't see the pictograph until the stars line up and illuminate that. It's the most fascinating thing to see, because somehow they got in there and they did the artwork, but the only time you can see it is when the full moon comes along right at that juncture. It's everything lines up perfectly in there, and I thought, wow, that's fascinating. And how did they know that? So I think energy fields are all over the planet, and if we build on top of some of these things, good or bad, that could lead a lot of this energy. It can drive a lot of this, good or bad.
Yeah, and I watched a History Channel documentary, I guess, on ley lines years and years ago, and I was trying to tap into that memory. And it would make sense. And I think you were mentioning the different energies that water and soils can produce too.
Right.
And if your home or building is on top of something that already has that energy, can you feel it? Can it be amplified through it?
Granite, limestone seem to be conductor of energy. Water, if you have running water at your house. That's why a lot of people, I think they like the sound of running water, so they do fountains.
Yeah. But
it also, in many cultures, running water drives away negative energy. It keeps positive energy. That's why you go into Chinese restaurants, right? They usually have some kind of water feature in there. Because
really
it's
big goldfish.
And really big goldfish, right? But the sound of water is it's positive. It's a positive force. So.
Well, it could also be just because it keeps the energy moving too.
True. Yeah.
Keep things moving to keep
right.
everything moving on. So I heard a theory a few years ago then that connected a lot of things in the Bermuda Triangle going on to the Great Lakes, because the Great Lakes have also had some really interesting things happen. And basically there's a line that runs that connects the two of them. And underneath the surface, the theory is that there's a certain type of rock formation there that, especially if there's an electrical storm, creates a very strong magnetic field.
Interesting.
And in fact, one of the cases they have on the Great Lakes is a very large ship full of iron ore just evaporated. Just all of a sudden gone. And they really think that's what it was. It was a metal ship full of iron ore. There was an electrical storm going on. And they think it just went over this line.
And it just drew it.
And the magnetic interference just really sucked that thing right down to the bottom of the lake before the ship even knew what happened.
That's amazing.
And then the water came over, and then, of course, ships aren't designed to be with tons of water on top of them, but so it stayed there. But that's what it was. And if you, a lot of the reports that I have heard dealing with the Bermuda Triangle specifically, that would explain a lot of that stuff. Mm-hmm. They were metal ships, metal planes. It also had to deal with, a lot of times, gauges, navigation gauges would be totally screwed up. That's how people ended up hundreds of miles off course.
Right.
because their navigation, that would be an electrical field issue.
Right.
And somebody's mentioning to me we haven't heard as much about the Bermuda Triangle. Well, because we don't use metals as much anymore.
True. Everything's fiberglass.
A lot of our planes are fiberglass
Right.
and the other not
Right.
as metal. So I think there's, could be something to this. So the ley lines or something could be connected. I believe there is something maybe underneath the earth that kind of connects the lines. It could have this magnetic effect, especially in times of storms.
Right.
If there's a electrical storm going on above the earth, it just makes that connection between the two.
I think there's a physical effect too. My parents have magnet gloves,
Mm-hmm.
and they swear by them.
Well, I've used magnet therapy on horses for 40 odd years now.
Yeah.
Magnets in their blankets, have pockets in their blankets sewn in, and I had when I worked at the racetracks, we used magnets. That was like the industry that really started magnet therapy was on racehorses.
Yeah.
Putting magnets on their legs to help blood flow on an injury, and they'd heal a lot faster.
Yeah.
So
maybe places like the Omni Hotel are actually on
right.
some type of place that has that.
It's fascinating stuff, and it would be really interesting to really dive into that and work with a team of people who would be interested in seeing,
Mm-hmm.
because you need a geologist and a physicist and all these different people to come together and study some of these locations and really dive into it. What causes this? If you don't believe it's paranormal and you think it's scientific, right, then how do you prove it or disprove it? I mean...
Well, that's my favorite saying in the whole wide world.
What?
And it's Adam Savage from the Mythbusters. And it's science when you write it down.
Science when you write it down. There you go.
That very well could be. There's a lot of this. And whenever we come across everything, that's always my first, can we explain this?
Right.
Yeah.
Is there an explanation, a logic behind this?
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the things that drew me to the paranormal, and especially towards the demonology side, is I want to find out, is it paranormal or is it the power of the human mind?
Yeah.
How strong is the human mind? How far will it take something?
Very.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's, that was one of the big things that drew me into the paranormal to begin with.
Yeah.
Is where is that explanation point? Can we explain it?
Yeah.
Well, for our listeners out there, if you've come across any of these locations that you feel either strongly it's very negative or very positive, I'd love for you to drop us a line on our Facebook page. Send us it's Pocatello Paranormal Research. Send us a message and let us know your experiences in some of these locations. I think it would be fascinating to hear about them.
I think so too.
Plus, we're always looking for ideas for places to go. So,
you bet.
Let us know.
We've got a long list, but we can fit some more in there.
All right. Speaking of spirits, we're glad you could join us today. We were talking about energy in buildings. Can buildings hold energy? What kind of energy? We are so glad you joined us. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next podcast.